by his words, because he was made in the image of God. But the breathing into his nostrils, the breath of life, that's how the true light, which is God, was transferred into man's spirit. That's what man's spirit was originally flooded with, filled with. That's what gave it the life originally that it had. Now, so Adam was ruling and having dominion over all creatures. He named them all. He just had total dominion. He was glowing. He was a light. He was the light of the world. Adam was the light of the world. Adam and Eve, they were the light of the world. So all other creatures saw them as light. They were glowing. They were literally glowing. You see, that light was just coming out from inside out. And that light was their covering that they had. So they didn't need to wear clothes, because the light was beaming. It was glowing all around them. Most likely from their eyes, through, you could see it just glowing out through their skin, but from the inside, and it covered them completely. So they could see them moving with the human figure that they had. But there was this light that was glowing from within them, just like Moses when he came down from that mountain. He was literally glowing, and the children of Israel had to run back because he was superhuman in his appearance, and that glory, that light that surrounded him, just kind of, it was his covering. So Adam and Eve didn't need covering. Again, they didn't need clothes to cover themselves. They were not naked in any way. The glory was the covering. So that's why I said earlier that they were the only creature God made that stands up erect and exposing their private parts, you see, because they didn't need any covering. So he didn't evolve from an ape and then became a man standing up erect. No, Adam and Eve were created erect because they had the glory for a covering. Okay, so if evolution was smart enough to cause every other animal to have a covering over their private parts, why would it then expose man, humankind, expose their private parts? It's supposed to be getting smarter. It's supposed to be, evolving to smarter creatures or better creatures, or having things better than it was before. But no, all the animals, they are bent over on their fours so that they protect or cover their private parts, or it's covered with skin, or it's always hidden. That's just the wisdom of God. It's always hidden. The private parts are always hidden. But with the human beings, the glory was the covering, so they didn't need any covering. But you see what happened when Adam and Eve disobeyed. That's what's the covering, and we're going to read that when they lost the covering, and then they needed. Right. So, okay, so we've. What is man that you're so mindful of him, the Son of Man, that you made him a little lower than Elohim? That's a little lower than God. So he's the only creature. Humans are the only creatures that are a little lower than God, because they are made in his image. They are, we're God's offspring, made in his image. So the animals and every other creature couldn't tell the difference between us back then and God, because that same light that God is, was the light in this physical body, and the light was glowing from the inside of them and covering their Okay, so now let's have a look at how everything went pear-shaped for the human race. In Genesis chapter 2 and verse 25, and they were both naked, and the man and his wife were not ashamed. So in other words, they were not ashamed, they were covered. They didn't have any reason to hide their private parts. So they were both naked, but they were not ashamed. So the light was just the only covering that they had, so they didn't need to cover themselves. They had no shame. They didn't need to cover themselves, so there was no cause to be ashamed. Now, if we read then in Genesis chapter 3, and you know the story how the serpent deceived Eve, and he asked Eve, let's just read that. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God made. And he said to the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, You shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said to the woman, You shall not surely die. For God does know that the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Okay, and if you read verse 6, and when the woman saw, so when the temptation came, the devil whispered through the serpent, whispered to the woman, or he spoke to the woman and told the woman a different thing from what God was saying. So this is when we start to talk about dark words that come from the dark side. They are lies. You see, we talk about light. God is light, and the light is the truth. So you have to learn to walk in the light, which is walking in the truth. And these words from the light, from God's light, from light, are the truth. That's why we dealt with words earlier. The thoughts and words coming from light, they are the truth. And only the truth can prosper. Only the truth can guarantee our future. But if we live the lie, if we hear and obey the lie, you see, so darkness throws lies at you, and light throws the truth at you. The true light throws the truth at you, and darkness throws lies at you. So now the serpent lied. He released words that were lies. Okay, he said, you can eat of the tree that God told them not to eat of. He said, God knows that if you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you become just like him. You see, you become just like God himself, and your eyes will be open and you'll be able to know the difference between good and evil. But God already told them that. God already told them that. I think it was in Genesis chapter 2, it's somewhere in chapter 2, verse 17, yeah. He says, But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Now the only twist, the devil never, the lie always comes disguised as a truth, disguised as something attractive, something good, like a good alternative to what God is offering. It always seemed a little smarter. It always looks wiser and smarter. It always gives you kind of a bailout plan from what God has asked you to do. It's always more attractive to the ears and to the eyes. Now, where he bent the truth, that's what it's called. The lies are twisted, they're wicked. Where he bent the truth was when he said, yeah, your eyes will be open and you will know the difference between good and evil. And God told them, if you eat of the tree of good and evil, you would die. But the devil said to them, you will surely not die. You will not surely die. In other words, that he can vow and vouch for the fact that they won't die. He was kind of swearing, surely, surely. When the Bible says surely, surely, it's like, I swear. So he was swearing that they will not die. So that's the opposite of what God said. But they both agree on the point that they will have the knowledge of good and evil. They agreed on that point, you see. But then he refuted the fact that they would die. So, and then if you read verse 6, eat. This is what made the woman now eat this. Eve looked at it, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, so it looked really delicious. It was pleasant to the eyes. It looked very attractive, and tree was desired, and a tree to be desired. So it was something that you could easily lust after, something that you could really crave to have instead of what you have. To make one wise, because she wanted more knowledge, more wisdom than what God was offering. So she took of the fruit and ate thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. Verse 7, and the eyes of both of them were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. So eating of this fruit, like you saw, all the qualities of this, you see, the dark side will always present to you a lie, but the lie has to look really good. The lie looks more comfortable. It looks like an easier way out. Okay, God's words are commandments. God just gave them an instruction, gave them a commandment. But then the dark side will always offer you reasoning, rather than just take God's word for it and know that when you eat this, you're going to die. Okay. But he began to reason with them to know, look at how attractive this is. You're not going to die. Forget about that dying stuff. He just doesn't want you to become God just like him, so that you would have no God over you. What he offered them is a life that had no one above them that they needed to be accountable to. So the devil is offering them a life where they don't have to answer to anyone, where they don't have to be accountable to any higher power, where they could be gods to themselves and they could make up the rules for their lives anyhow they want it. There will be no higher moral authority or no one to oversee or supervise what. No. They were going to be gods of their own fully, you see. And that's what he was offering them. Now remember, God had already made them God. He said, you are gods. And he put them over all his creation. He gave them dominion and gave them what makes them able to have dominion. The true light was inside of them. So, but somehow the deceiver, the darkness is always deceptive. Grass always looks green on the other side. And disobeying God, sometimes you think you're so smart that you can disobey him in a very intelligent way. There are people, Christians, who feel that, oh, well, I don't have to do exactly the way God says it, and then they start to intelligently think that I'm smarter than God. So I'm going to go find my way around it. I'll find my way of doing it and still achieving my purpose, you see, and still kind of obey God partially. That's partial obedience, you see. There are people who would say the law of God or the commandment or instruction of God was just too harsh, it's just too strict, it's just too linear. You've got to be able to bend it to suit my situation at the time. I've got to be able to tell one or two lies, just to get past this crossroad. I've got to be able to do my own thing right now, and God will, he'll understand. No. The reason why God gives these instructions is because he created the entire system, so he knows what's good for you and what's not good for you. Every commandment of God is for your blessing, is for your lifting, is to keep that light that he put in you on. If you obey it, you stay alive. Your light stays on and you live a glorious life. You disobey it, you go down. God doesn't go down when you disobey. Adam and Eve were chased out of the Garden of Eden. God wasn't chased out of the Garden of Eden. God didn't need to be chased out of anywhere. Whether you obey him or disobey him, he's still God. Whether you think that his instructions about any issue of life is just the strict way to go about things and not try to be 10 steps ahead of anybody. Okay? Whether you think that's right or not doesn't change God. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. You front slide, you backslide, he's the same. So the best deal for you is just obey him. You may not understand the secret behind what he's telling you, but just go trust him and just take his word for it on every issue of life. Take God's word for it. If God says don't do this, I don't care how you're feeling in the flesh, I don't care how attractive it looks, I don't care how desirable that thing is that you want to do, I don't care how angry you are, and you just go off and do whatever you like against what God has written or spoken or instructed you. You say, well, I'm not happy, I'm angry, I'm going to do what I want. Or no, this way is more comfortable, or this is more attractive. This will get me where I'm going quicker. This will make me happier. I'm not going to, whatever your excuse. He only gave that instruction because he understands the system that he created. You step out, you will die. Okay? So, and they died. But they were thinking that people say, well, why didn't they didn't die? I mean, they lived for another like 1,000 years. But the death that God was talking about is the death of the spirit. That's the true light that he put on the inside of them, which gave them the power to have dominion over all things. Okay? It left. And darkness flooded their souls. And then their eyes were opened. You see? So that's the death that's more crucial. It's worse than dying physically. So that's why we go around anyone who has lost that true light. Anyone who has lost that true light and is flooded with darkness. In fact, all of humankind, after Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, disobeyed God's commandment, God's instruction and commandment to them, they fell out. The light left them because they had walked in disobedience. They had walked in disobedience. Some people say, but why would God put that tree there, knowing that they could eat it, knowing, because he's all knowing, so he knew that they were going to eat it. Yeah, because God didn't create robots. God doesn't want to have robots as his children. He wanted a creature that has the power of choice. So he put the tree there and gave him the power of choice. You see? So, because God has the same choice, power of choice. God can choose to do evil, but he doesn't. He can choose to do stuff that will mess things up, but he doesn't. So he created a creature that's in its exact same image, not a robot. And even animals are not robots, but they live just by their 5 physical senses, by their instincts. They just survival. You see? So God wasn't even trying to have animals as his children. No, he wanted a creature that was exactly like him, that could decide not to eat for 40 days. Animals can't just wake up and say, I'm not going to eat for 40 days for no reason, because they're fasting. You know, God made a creature that can decide not to have sexual relations before marriage. You see? They make that choice. God could make a creature that could decide not to do one thing or the other, not to lie, not to, you know, they can decide not to take someone else's food or someone else's money, not to steal it. They have the power of choice. Even if everyone else is doing it, they can say, no, I'm not doing it. That's my choice. So he's not living by instincts or animal instincts or by his 5 physical senses. No, that wasn't the kind of creature that God. Man was his son. Or humankind were his children, his son, and Adam and Eve were his son and his daughter. They were made in his exact same image, having that power of choice. So God wouldn't take away the liberty of choice from man. Otherwise, he would have created an animal or a robot. That's not what humankind was meant to be. That's not what we're meant to be. It's not what we're created to be. So the instruction was given saying, don't touch this particular tree, because what happens with that one is that it gives you access to your soul and your mind, your spirit. It gives access to the dark side. When you disobey him, you have access will be given to the dark side. I think that's what really happened there. Was you look at the tree like some kind of tithe, like a 10%, okay, of all that was in the Garden of Eden, and the tithe, maybe God's own portion. You see, so it's just like the principle of tithing. God's own portion, the portion that goes to the work of God, the portion that goes to the house of God to keep it going. It's just the 10%. You still have the 90%. So he had all the trees in the world, and there's only one tree that God reserved for himself and said, look, if you eat this fruit. So I don't really think that there was something in the fruit that would allow darkness to get into him, into Adam and Eve. But I think it was just the principle of disobeying God's instruction or stealing God's own share. So not having that principle of knowing this is yours and this is mine. And if you can choose to do the right thing, don't go after mine. I think that's what really, when they disobeyed his commandment, that's what made darkness flood their souls. The disobedience is that they've broken You see, remember John 1:5, 1 John 1:5 says that God is light and in him is no darkness at all. So them breaking that agreement that he had with them and went forth and touched his own tree, or the tree that was reserved for a reason, even if it wasn't, I mean, God's not going to eat from the tree, but say he reserved it for another purpose. He created everything, so he can say, look, leave this area as reserve area. Don't trample into it. Don't go there. Don't, it's a reserve area. I know why I need a reserve area. Whatever God's reason was, he's the creator and he knows why he needed it. But because man or humankind had the power of choice, he expected him to exercise that choice. So when humans refuse to eat that out of choice, it emboldens and empowers them the more. And it delights God the more. You see that he didn't make a robot. This is a creature just like me. He knows that he can do this. He has the power to do this, but he's not doing it because I said don't do it. Okay, so I hope that kind of explains all that took place right there. So when they did, and remember, they said the tree was, if eating that tree would give you access to the knowledge of good and evil. So that means that all that Adam and Eve had access to before then was the knowledge of good. They could only do good. And remember, the Bible says that God looked at everything that he created at the end of Genesis chapter 1 and saw that it was all good. So everything that light creates or brings into place is good. It functions perfectly well. It has all the information in it, like I said, in the words that he speaks, has the perfect information to make it a good product, to make it a good creature. It's good on its own. It's good. You don't need to add to it. You don't need to remove from it. Okay? It's perfect. So man could only receive such good thoughts and was able to name all the animals. When God brought them to him, he said, name them. He named them all. He was just doing the good. All he could pick from the ether of thoughts that surrounds us was good thoughts, because the true light was in him. It was just feeding him with good thoughts, and he was doing only good things. Now, disobeying God, okay, making that choice to disobey God and go after that tree that they were told not to go after the tree or not to disobey his instruction, gave them access because they believed the lie that the devil told them that they're not going to die. That's just, they're just going to get more powerful, whatever their reason was attractive, and they went for it. Now that knowledge is power. Knowledge is like a key. Okay, we'll explain that a little later. So because of that knowledge of good and evil, they kind of opened the door. So their eyes were open, so they opened the door, and what couldn't have access to them before, when they were only sticking to obeying the instructions of light, the darkness that couldn't gain access into their souls, into their spirit, flooded in. So their eyes were open. So that knowledge it's kind of like a key that opened them up to darkness having access into their souls, their spirit. Okay, so but we'll explain that a lot better later on, so you can understand why knowledge, or how knowledge is a key. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is a key. So they gave power. They opened the door. They by the key of knowledge, they opened the door to the dark side. So now they had the knowledge of both good and evil, which they didn't have prior to that. Okay, so and immediately they died. The Bible says they died because they saw that they were naked. So the light had left them. They'd lost the true light. The light left. Remember, God is light, and in him there's no darkness at all. So they lost the true light, and darkness flooded their souls. And this darkness, according to the Bible, affected everything, all generations after them. So this darkness has ability to affect you genetically, because remember, the word, the true light that brought us into existence, had genetic information in it that gave us our features and everything that we have, and it's so precise, and so scientists will tell you how perfect. You see, these things work like clockwork. It's perfect. The information is just out of this world. You know, and intelligent design scientists who believe in intelligent design or creationists, they would tell you how detailed this stuff is. That this stuff just couldn't have been happening by chance or by accident or some natural selection and all that. That's total crap. But of course, it's the same devil who's blindfolding people and always giving them reason not to believe what God said. always giving them reason, and he will make it look good. He will make it look attractive. He'll tell you, they will tell you how they found fossils and of transitioning creatures, and all that has been debunked. You see, if you Google, you find out, just Google transition fossils debunked, and you see so many people that have shown that it's not true. It wasn't debunked at all. There's no animal transiting anywhere. They're all just the way God said in Genesis chapter 1, that everything produces only after its kind. It cannot move to another species. You cannot transition from one species to another. It has never happened, and it will never happen. Okay, so I'll give you links to scientists who are, I'm not a scientist. I'll give you links to scientists that you can go and study their work. You can just read up their work on Google or whatever, and you will see it so clearly. It's all debunked. Even the age of the earth, the whole 6 days creation story, they will show you that the machines they're using to carbon date and all of that, they're fake. They're not working. The machines are not. I'll just send you the link. They've been able to get fossils made in 3 hours. Stuff decayed into fossils in 3 hours, some in 5 hours. They've been able to do that. The scientists have been able to do that. So it doesn't take millions of years for these fossils to come up, and with the right amount of heat. So when they don't know what took place and don't believe God's account of things, you see, they don't believe that the true light and all of that had the power to put things in place in a matter of a day, and then 6 days, or So, but I'll send you those links and you can go see it. These are people who have proved it scientifically. Okay, so now, but that's digressing, and you see, so that's where the whole problem began. In Romans chapter 5, verse 12 to 14, I was talking about the genetic information in humankind was affected. You see, light and darkness will affect your genes. It will affect the information in your genes. Like I said, words carry information all the time. And when you receive it, it begins to make impact. It alters things, okay, in your makeup. Now, if you read Romans chapter 5, verses 12 to 14, it says that when Adam and Eve fell, that darkness or death came upon them, and it passed on to all the generations after them. All generations after them. So any creature, like any human being that was born after Adam and Eve fell, lost the true light, every one of us was born into darkness. So, because remember, God said that He would punish iniquity even to the 4th generation, even to 1,000 generations. Okay, so if you read Romans chapter 5 and verses 12 to 14, wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, that's Adam, sin entered into the world, and death by sin, so death passed on all men, for that all have sinned now. So it was transferred, the darkness that he had allowed into his spirit, into his soul, spirit and soul, that had flooded his heart. Now every child he gives birth to is born with that darkness. He transfers that darkness into them. So they're born with the same darkened spirit. Okay, so that's why I said it affects you genetically. And then we're going to see how the true light also affects people genetically. But we'll get to that. So that's what happened to them. And in Romans chapter, verse 14 of Romans 5, nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even to them that had not sinned, after the similitude of Adam's transgression, who's the figure of him that was to come. So death reigned from Adam all the way to Moses, even over people who didn't. So even if you're morally good, you grew up a really nice guy, a nice girl, and you're just being as nice as you can to people, and you're obeying. Let's say you're obeying the instructions of God that you learned from church or whatever, and you're trying to be as nice as possible. So no, you're born with that darkness in you. You're born with that darkness, so it's not going to make any difference. Adam and Eve had brought genetically now have transferred the darkness to all generations of humankind. There's nothing you can do to get that true light back inside of you on your own. It's not going to be possible. It's not possible. Okay, so that's how humankind ended up there. And I mentioned here Romans 8:19. Okay, so that's how all of creation fell into darkness. For the earnest expectation of the creature waited for the manifestation of the sons of God. For the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who has subjected the same in hope. Okay, so we've been delivered into bondage and corruption. Okay, so that's what happened. All of creation. Remember, all creation was linked to Adam and Eve at creation. Everything else created because of the true light. That was the source of their creation. Then, it was the substance that everything else was made of. So everything else that was made was connected to Adam because he was the only one on the earth with that true light on the inside of him. So everything else was connected to him. And but when he fell from the true light, when he disobeyed God and lost the true light, he fell into darkness, or darkness flooded his soul. So everything else in creation was subject to the bondage of darkness. Everything. Because remember, God put him in charge of everything. God connected everything to Adam and Eve, and we have scientific proof of the fact that we're all connected. We're all connected. Like I said, you need to start, if you learn a little more about quantum mechanics or quantum physics, whatever it's called, you see that everything is connected with humans. Everything is connected. Everything is connected. And even if you look at the whole tree, when they talk about the food chain, you see, you find out that every creature is connected to one another. So this one's food for this one, and then this one's food for that one. So, so it's all connected. And the ones who eat the plants, and then, everything. The plant has its purpose. Okay? Without plant life, there will be no life, because animals have to eat the plants. And then when they excrete, the waste, it goes back to the soil and becomes manure. It fertilizes the soil. And helps the plants to get the nutrients they need to continue, to absorb the nutrients they need from soil. So it's all interconnected. Every creature has a purpose. Every creature. Scientists have proved that there's no creature that doesn't have its purpose. I think the last one they found out the purpose was the housefly, because it seemed like the only one that couldn't really find out what its purpose was till they did. So every single creature had a purpose. So it's all interconnected. We're all connected. Adam and Eve, when they fell, everything connected to them because they were spiritually connected to Adam and Eve. Like I said earlier, that I believe that Adam could tell when a bird probably falls from the sky, or if a bird is looking for food and couldn't find food. I believe that Adam, when the true light was with him, because he was now the God of the world. He was now the God of the world. And the Bible says that there's no bird could fall from the sky that your heavenly Father didn't have knowledge of. He said they go around, they feed, and no one feeds them. They don't work, they don't labor, they don't work, they don't gather, for a harvest. They don't save food for the future. No, he said, but every day your heavenly Father feeds them. If you read in Matthew chapter 6, your heavenly Father feeds them. So, but that was Adam's role. That was Adam's role. You see, before he fell, he could telepathically communicate with them. He was just given everything. Everyone was handed over to him. So when he fell, everyone fell with him. And I believe that's when animals became violent, because that same darkness fell on them. And what darkness does is that it gives fear. Darkness, the first thing darkness does is to instill fear into you. When people say, oh, walking on a dark alley, you kind of feel afraid, or when there's no light somewhere, you feel there's that fear, the chills, the darkness brings. Well, literally, darkness, the first thing it gives you is fear and shame. Because if you read, the first thing that happened to Adam and Eve, as soon as they ate this, they knew that they were, I would say that they immediately, their eyes were open and they saw that they were naked. So the first thing they saw was their nakedness, the shame. They became ashamed. You see, they're falling out of light, they're falling into darkness, and darkness makes you do stuff that is shameful. Okay, and the eyes of them were open, and they knew that they were naked. It's Genesis chapter 3 and verse 7. So they sewed fig leaves. So they took leaves and sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. So they covered their private parts quickly with fig leaves. So they knew to do that. You see, so the shame. And then when God came down in the cool of the evening, and they heard the voice of the Lord, verse 10, and he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. I hid myself. So man starts to hide in the darkness. He starts to hide his deeds. He starts to hide around. He starts to play games. So he hid himself, because darkness comes with all of that. If you're not living an open, transparent, honest life, you just have something you're hiding from that person, and hiding this from that person, and making this secret, and exposing this to that person, and not exposing this, not being able to just be honest and truthful, and enjoy the light and blessings of God. Enjoy that dominion that you were created to walk in. But you're now having to hide. Adam didn't need to hide from God before. Now you're having to hide this and hide that information and secretly do that. You're killing yourself. You're not killing anyone else. Then to come up straight and do the right thing. Just come out straight and do the right thing. Do the right thing. Swallow your pride and do the right thing. Okay? And you see the blessing of God will just come over you. And you start to prosper again. You start to, like, everything opens up. But as long as you continue to do the wrong thing and you expect things to change, it's not going to change, because you're walking in darkness. You've stepped into darkness, you see, and that darkness has control over your life now. So you're going to have what comes with darkness. Fear comes with darkness. Shame comes with darkness. Failure, void. Remember we said darkness, anywhere darkness is, it's void and formless. It has no form. It will not have anything structured going on in your life. It will be formless. Nothing will be sure. Nothing will be solid. Nothing will be creative. Nothing. You won't have what it takes to enjoy your life on the earth. Okay. So and he said to them, have you eaten? God said to them, verse 11. So you've eaten the fruit of the tree that I told you not to eat, that I commanded thee that thou should not eat. And this is what happens in darkness as well. Verse 12. And the man said, the woman who thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. It's blame gaming. The game of blaming people. That's what happens in darkness, or people who are walking in darkness. They're just quick to blame someone else for everything they do. They could be doing everything wrong, and if they started doing everything right, they wouldn't have reason to blame anybody. But they will continue to do the wrong thing. They'll continue to approach life with the wrong attitude, approach people with the wrong, disobeying what God said they should do towards these people. But then they end up blaming. Adam could have stopped Eve, but he blamed Eve. He could have said, no, that's not what we're supposed to do. But he blamed her immediately. He started pointing fingers. Those are the things that come with darkness. You see, finger pointing and name blaming and blame gaming and all of that. So Eve did the same thing, because they were all in darkness now. That's just how it goes. Eve said, well, it's the serpent, not me. No one was taking responsibility anymore. No one was taking responsibility to do what is instructed to be done. No, everyone was a victim. Everyone becomes a victim. In the dark world, everyone's a victim. Rather than look up and square up to their responsibility and say, look, I was wrong in the way I went about things, and I'm ready to make that change so that we can straighten this thing out. No, it's their fault, it's his fault, it's her fault. And then the woman was like, oh, it's the serpent's fault. Everyone was just, no, it's not me, it's not me, it's you, it's your fault. That's all. They didn't have to get into all that, if they stayed in the light, if they stayed obeying God's ways of doing things, they wouldn't have to. And I believe if they had said, look, this is how it went about, but they couldn't, because when you're in darkness, you don't do things the right way anymore. Remember, darkness creates unproductive living. You just mistake. Same thing when you switch off the light in your house. Can you take any sure steps? You'll be stumbling around. If you switch off the lights and there's absolutely no light, you just start stumbling around. You start doing all kinds of madness. When you start misbehaving and doing all kinds of madness, know that you're most likely in darkness. Your lights have been switched off. Okay? But we'll go deeper into understanding what darkness really is as we go along. Now, so everything fell into darkness. Everything fell into darkness. And I want to read a scripture in 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7 at this point. The Bible said, and God has not given us the spirit of fear. That's not the original spirit that was given to us. He's not the one who gave us that spirit. We opened up for that to come in. God has not given humankind the spirit of fear. That comes with darkness. When we open ourselves to darkness, those are the things you get. When we're dead or when we're not walking in the light. He said, but rather he gave us the spirit of power, the spirit of love, the spirit of a sound mind. Now we'll be going into that whole sound mind thing a little bit more. You see, when we talk about intelligence and creative abilities and all of that, it can only it's the true light that gives that kind of intelligence. But when you're walking in darkness, your intelligence levels, your creativity goes, it just dies off. Believe me. Now this is different from talent and all of that. No, that I'll show you what creativity really means. Okay, we'll get there and we'll dive a little deeper into that so you can understand what it means by originally we had the spirit of power. That's what we had. The light gave us dominion and power over all things, and love and a sound mind, relating positively to everyone. And a sound, it comes with a sound mind, high level of intelligence. Okay, now creative intelligence. Okay, so fear, yeah, so that came with the darkness. And the fear and all of that comes with darkness. And this is when animals then, when darkness is flooded everywhere, this is when animals began to eat one another and began to eat humans as well. Before, they wouldn't dare come anywhere near Adam and Eve. They worshipped them. They were light. They could see. I mean, everyone, no matter how mad you are, you know, when you see fire, you run away. I mean, you know that the fire will consume you. So they were glowing. And they had that power. So animals just knew to worship them. No one could dare to think of eating them. But now they became food for everyone. They had to hide and run around and all sorts of things. That's what happens when you're in darkness. The whole darkness had flooded everything that was connected to Adam and Eve. Okay, so even microorganisms couldn't penetrate that light. It will roast you before you get into his body. But now mine could drink some water and he's got typhoid, he's got malaria, he's got all kinds of stuff coming into his system that normally wouldn't even survive a split second in his system. It wouldn't even get in. It would die before it goes in there. So he's got all kinds of stuff now, have access to even the littlest of things that used to be so scared of were so, you know, he used to reverence, man, because there's no way he would even attempt to go into human beings' bodies. Now the littlest things find their way in there and start to eat away. But God always has a solution. So the solution was put in place by the way, and we'll be looking at what the solution is. So yeah, that's how sickness and disease and all kinds of stress and poverty and everything came. And when God was telling them what had happened, because people say, well, why did God curse them? God didn't curse them. I'll show you what he said to Adam. Because in verse 17 of Genesis chapter 3, he said, and to Adam, he said, this is after he's spoken to the serpent, he has spoken to Eve and told them what's going to happen. What God was doing was revealing to them the consequences of what they've just done. He wasn't cursing them. He was telling them what they've done. Look at verse 17 in Genesis chapter 3. And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. So the ground is cursed now because of you. So your actions have brought darkness on even the ground. I said everything was connected to Adam and Eve. Everything. Everything was connected to Adam, because obviously he was the first one to be created, and everything was connected to him. And then Eve was made from his rib, right? So everything was connected to Adam. Everything was connected to Adam. And he said, because of what you've done as you stepped into darkness, everything has come into darkness. Everything created has gone dark. Even the soil has absorbed the nature of darkness. And look at this. It commanded saying, thou shalt not eat. So he says, so now cursed is the ground for thy sake, because of you. It's not God who cursed the ground. The ground became cursed because the darkness entered into the soil. Just like the light that was in Adam originally was affecting the soil, and the soil was very productive. The soil would yield bumper harvest, and the kind we've never seen. The same kind of light that made the entire vegetation appear in one day was created in one day. That's the kind of light that was inside of Adam. And now that everything was now subject by God's commandment and creative purpose to the sun for photosynthesis, it was still yielding because Adam's light and the sunlight were working together to keep everything fertile, keep everything going the way that it was supposed to be. It was bumper harvest. It was super productive. Everything, the entire earth was super productive at an alarming speed and rate, top quality stuff. But when this happened, he said, look, you've cursed the ground. The darkness that you've brought in, because you're the God of the whole world, it's all yours. And God isn't going to take it from him just because he disobeyed. The Bible says that God, he values his word more than his own name. He places his word above his own name. In other words, God is very legalistic. If he's in a covenant with you, an agreement with you, he can't break it. You're the one who's going to end up breaking it. He can't break it. And even when you've broken it, he still stays on his own side. You see, he still keeps to his own side of the deal. So he's given Adam the whole world to be God over it. So he's not going to jump in and say, well, I'm taking over. No, it's Adam's world. God made himself kind of illegal in the world. So anything he needed to do, he's always having to find a human being to do it through, because he's made himself illegal on the earth. It's yours. It's your world. So you can choose to do whatever you want. And he can only ask and look for men and women who he can speak to, who would hear his voice and obey, and then he can start to kind of direct them on what to do to help. You see, the laws of God are strict, and he keeps to them strictly. That's why he said his word, he puts it above even his name, or trying to make a name for himself. That's how legalistic God is. Okay? He said, look, for your sake, the whole place is cursed. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of your life. So you're going to have a very sorrowful life. Don't care how much money you make, and you're going to have to sweat so hard. Say, thorns and thistles, verse 18, shall it bring forth to you. Thou shalt eat herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of it wast thou taken. For dust thou art, and now unto dust shalt thou return. So now you're literally going to be like the animals. And because you were made of dust, you return to dust. You've lost the spiritual angle. You've lost the most vital angle. You've lost your spiritual angle. You've lost the real you. And, it's now flooded with darkness. And everything has been cursed. So you're going to have to sweat to survive. You're going to have to engage in survival of the fittest. You're going to have to do whatever you have to do to survive. Even to your fellow human beings, everyone's going to have to struggle to climb up that ladder. And you can pull down anyone you can pull down to get up there. You just have to do what you got to do now. You're literally like an animal in the jungle. Even the lions are the king of the jungle because they're physically more able than you. So you're going to have to, do whatever you have to do to survive. That's what Adam and Eve fell into when they stepped into darkness, when they opened up the door for darkness to come in. Okay? Well, you might say, well, man's become intelligent enough to create guns that they can use to shoot animals now. It has nothing to do with evolution. We'll get to the point where you see how he was able to become creative again, and how he was able to have the intelligence to be able to survive amongst these animals again. He's still living way below his creative power and purpose. Way below. But I'll show you at what point we were able to begin to access that true light and begin to use it to advance the human race in so many ways, technology, everything. We'll get to how that came to be. So, but for now, this was the verdict. And because God is light and in him is absolutely no darkness at all, now humankind, we're now in darkness. There's no way. It's like mixing oil and water. God had to push them out of the garden. He told them, now you've got yourself kicked out of the garden, because darkness can't dwell in the same place that God dwells. 1 John 1:5. He said, in him is no darkness. There's not a dot of darkness. If darkness gets into God, everything will shut down. Everything. Imagine what happened to Adam. Everything got shut down in darkness. Everything became violent. All the animals went crazy. There's a study that shows that animals, originally, all animals were eating plants. Originally. And that's what the Bible says. And that these, the teeth required, the incisors and all that, all the teeth that the carnivorous animals now used to eat meat and all of that, they kind of developed adaptatively. So they were like adaptations. They came up so that they can eat whatever they see. You see, but before, animals weren't eating animals. So, but now they are, since the darkness fell on everyone. There's a study that shows something like that, but I haven't got the link to that. I saw that a long time ago, but they really, if you can Google it, I'm sure you see it. There's a lot of experiments, and they showed that originally, all these animals were not eating. They're not eating meat or flesh or blood. No, they're eating one plant or the other. All of them, including lions. And when this darkness came, they said something happened, but we know what happened. Something happened, and then they began to develop these features and were able to start, they started eating whatever they could find, including their fellow animals, and then they started developing these other kind of teeth to be able to do that. So that's that for that. Okay, so now let's move on to so the consequences. If you see in 2 Corinthians, we said, God is light, so he had to kick them out of the garden because there's no spot of darkness is allowed into God. So you read in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 4, it says, what relationship or what fellowship can light have with darkness? Remember, the essence of this true light, according to 1 John chapter 1, I think verse 4, was so that our fellowship with God, so we could fellowship with him the way that he created us for fellowship. And ourselves, good relationship with ourselves. But darkness changed all of that. So 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 4, it says, what fellowship has light with darkness? What fellowship has light with darkness? It's not possible anymore. So, so God didn't just drive him out, because some people have that understanding that God just drove him. No. Light and darkness can't fellowship. They can't mix. Like oil and water, there's no way they can mix. And God doesn't need a drop of darkness to get into him. If it does, everything's gone. Everything's gone. You don't even want that to happen. So they had to come off. They had to be removed from the Garden of Eden. They literally removed themselves, because light and darkness they can't. It's not possible. There's no dot of darkness that can get into God. It's not going to happen. So, and it's for our good. It's for our good that he doesn't go dark. Okay, that no darkness gets into the light, the true light. So it stays pure, it stays true. And you read Psalm 82, verses 5 to 7. You see all the effects of this stuff. This stuff was a colossal, it was a terrible event that brought colossal damage to the human race. Psalm 82, verse 5 to 7. He said, they know not, neither will they understand. So they don't know. Humankind, we're not knowledgeable anymore. We've got the wrong kind of knowledge going on now, and we have no more understanding. So they walk on in that darkness. So they carried on in that darkness, and all the foundations of the earth are out of course. Imagine that. Because of this incident, all the foundations of the earth are now out of course. So everything has gone off course. Things are not the way they were created to be. Things are now defected. They've gone off course. There was a purpose and course for everything created, but now they've gone off course. Now they're doing other things. Now, it explains a lot of scientific things that you see that are kind of off course. They're off the normal progression. They just look abnormal. You get people born with some levels of abnormality, and you get yeah, all kinds of things. Like I said, the animals start eating one another. All kinds of things going on that wasn't the original thing. It wasn't the way everything was created to function. Darkness messes everything up. So things have gone off course. So there are a lot of stuff that is not operating the way that they were creatively, they were created to be. Okay, so I said this stuff affects your genes. So man's intelligence and everything, ability to understand. Remember, we read in the scripture that said that the inspiration of God. You see that there's a spirit of man, and it's the inspiration of the Almighty that gives him understanding, or gives him revelation, gives him insight, gives him high-level intelligence, understanding of things, to be able to understand things correctly. All that was lost. So he said, because they're walking on in darkness, they have no understanding now. They're just making things up and just groping in the dark and just, feeling for things. They have no insight. They have no revelation of things. They can't see things from that realm, which is the real realm where they're supposed to pick up their wisdom and understanding from and translate it into this realm. So all that was lost. Okay. So now, so they had now, I wrote here that they've now taken on the image of darkness. Remember, they were made originally in the image of God, and we know that God is light, the true light. So now they've taken on the image of darkness by choice. By their decision. They've taken on, now they look like the dark one. Now they look like, they're now filled with thoughts of darkness. You see, that's why at the point, God had to say that the heart of man is desperately wicked, who can know it? It's that he kind of regretted making man, because they were filled with the darkness now. Okay? So now, but what as I talked about fixing it, God had an immediate plan to fix it. Even before Adam fell, God already knew he was going to fall, and he already put the plan in place. Now, he had to bring a second Adam. I'm carefully going through all these things so that when we get to where we are today, with the relationship between humankind and the true light, so that we can get where we with proper understanding of how we got to where we are today. Okay, because now we have access again to the true light, but I want to show you how we got that and how everything got fixed. And that's where Jesus comes in. So he sent the second Adam to fix this. So that was the purpose of Jesus coming in, was to fix this. But because, like I said, God is legalistic. He puts his word above his name. He's not going to jump down here as a spirit and fix everything. Someone once said, if God is all-knowing and all-powerful, why didn't he just, why did he have to go kill his son on the cross? And why did he commit murder? I thought he said, thou shalt not kill. Why did he commit murder? You would know that it's that same lack of understanding that's causing people to talk that way. They have no revelation. They're now talking from a standpoint of people who are in the dark. Just, lack of understanding, So, yeah, well, I can enlighten the ones that are willing to hear or receive some enlightenment. God is legalistic, and he would not invade your life. He would not force you to do what you don't choose to do. He would only pass information across to you. You can accept it, you can refuse it, just like Adam and Eve. They disobeyed him. It's their choice. And like I said, he's not going to come in here and mess things up or change them. No, it's our world. We were created to own this place. So he's not going to force, but he can send in another human being. Now, this human being, the only way he could keep the true light in him from birth is to ensure that he's not born by human sperm, that he didn't get his DNA and genes from the information that was covered with darkness from the existing human beings. Because, like we said, everyone was affected by Adam's fall. This stuff, light and darkness, affects you genetically. It affects your generations. It affects your generations. We'll see how that works. It affects your generations. So everyone had that darkness on them. Okay? So now, he needed to bring Jesus in. And if you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 45. 1 Corinthians 15 and 45. You see how Jesus came. 15:45. He's talking about Jesus here, and he said, and so it's written, the first man Adam was made a living soul, and the last Adam was made a quickening spirit. Okay, so Jesus is the last Adam, and to prove that, you can read Romans chapter 5 and verse 17. I just want to let you see that, so that you'll understand that God is a God of great purpose, perfect master planner. For if by one man's offense death reigned by one, that's Adam, much more, or how much more, they which receive abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness shall reign in life by one Jesus Christ. So if because one man got it wrong, he disobeyed God, offense, death reigned on all men. Everyone he gave birth to, death reigned over them, darkness. That's what it means by death. They died, like God said, you're going to die. The death was darkness. Is going to flood your soul, your spirit, and it's going to take over everything. So death reigned on everyone. Okay, death reigned. That's why you hear people saying that, like I said earlier, no matter how moralistically good you are, if you don't understand this and take God's prescription, okay, to fix the problem in the spirit realm, the darkness that you're into, you can be as nice and moralistic and as virtuous as you can try to be. It's not going to fix it for you. It's not going to fix it. Nothing can fix it except God's remedy. God has a remedy, and that's the only thing that can fix the problem and get you out of darkness and back into the light. Okay, so you can start having proper dominion and stop sweating. Stop killing yourself to survive. Okay, so or killing others to survive. So 1 Corinthians 15:45, Romans 5:17. So Jesus came as the true light again. So in Luke chapter 1 verse 35, the Bible says that the power of the Most High, the power of the highest, when Mary was saying, the angel appeared to Mary, Jesus' mother, and was telling her that, look, you're going to have a child, and you will name him Jesus. He's the Son of God. He's going to save the whole world from their sins, or from that darkness. He's going to take that darkness away. He will take away the sin of the world, or the effect of the fall of man. He's going to take it all away. So Mary was like, how's that going to be? I haven't known a man. I'm not married. I haven't had any sexual intercourse with any man because I'm not married. So I'm a virgin. And the angel said, well, don't worry about that. We'll take care of that. The power of the highest, read Luke chapter 1 and verse 35, that the power of the highest will come upon you, and it will give you seed. It will give you seed into your egg, and you will conceive. So you're going to be with a child because of the power of the highest that's going to come and conceive that egg within you, and you will be pregnant. Okay? And you know what trouble that caused with Joseph wanting to, because they were engaged, about to get married. The next thing he knows, and she's saying, look, I'm pregnant, but I'm pregnant. The Holy Spirit, an angel appeared to me, and so Joseph didn't get that. You know the whole story. Joseph was upset, and he was like, no, I don't believe this. You're gonna have to go away, and this, that, and the other. He wanted to put her away secretly. He was a nice guy. He said, look, I'm not going to shame you. I'm not going to tell everyone what you've done, because I know you've gone and cheated on me, but no problem. I'm just going to let you go quietly. Just leave me alone. You go your way, I'll go my way. But then the angel appeared to Joseph as well and said, look, this is us. We're working on something here. What she told you was true. The Savior of the world is going to have to come in through Mary, because we found her worthy. Okay, so she can handle this. You need to work with her. So you need to take ownership of this stuff and go ahead and marry her. That's essentially what he was instructed to do. Go ahead and marry her and be the father, the biological or physical father over this child. But this is the Son of God. So, and Joseph, finally after that dream, Joseph then quickly got on board, and that's what happened. Now, Jesus came with the true light in him. That was the only way God could bring him in. So he came with the true light, but he had to come as a human being. Just like Adam. Adam had no physical, biological father. It was the same breath of life that he breathed into the clay that gave life to him. So I don't know why people find it difficult to think that God could do it again, but this time put the baby in a woman's womb, make the conception take place in an existing human being, in a woman. Same thing, just breathed into her, and she conceived, and then was able to bring forth this child who has no DNA or genes of the father running. And scientifically, I think they said the chromosomes, the genetic makeup and the DNA and stuff of a child, it comes from the father, and all of the things come from the mother. So the actual, the main DNA stuff comes from the father. So, and that's why God had to stop Mary from conceiving from a man and a biological father, because then it's already corrupted with darkness, and he wouldn't have come out with the true light. So God sent him in. He's the only thing now, or only one on the earth carrying the true light. And all through his life, he lived about 33 years before he was crucified. All through his life, he continuously chose to stay in the light. He kept making choices no matter what suggestions. He was in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights before he broke out with his ministry, before he came out and started his full-time ministry. And a lot of suggestions. The same serpent came to him, the same devil came to him, whispering all kinds of things to him, telling him, look, Adam gave me everything. I can make you rich, I can make you great, I can put every nation under your feet. To get, took him up on the mountain and showed him everything now is mine, because Adam legally gave it to me. He handed over. He made me his Lord. He made me his father. He's now in my image. So literally, the God that was ruling humankind now, the God that he was answering to, because he thought that, like the serpent lied to him, that when you disobey God, you become a God unto your own. No, man is never going to be a God to himself. There's always a spiritual God over him. It's either he's under the rule of the true light, God himself, the light, or he's under the rule of the devil, darkness himself. So, but one way or the other, the spirit realm will always have control. Okay, so these are the super beings of the spirit realm, but they weren't created by the devil, but he submitted himself to the devil. And there's a scripture that says that whoever you submit yourself to serve is who you become in bondage to. So if you're in bondage to sin or to darkness, that means you've submitted yourself to serve the Lord of darkness, the prince of this world. That's the devil, darkness. So with that, Jesus refused, with every temptation that came his way, he refused to allow darkness into his heart or into his life. He refused to make any decision that would disobey God. So he always challenged the darkness when those dark thoughts came, or when he had physical, probably facial, face-to-face confrontation from the devil himself, probably appeared to him physically and said these things to him. But he didn't fall for it. He always quoted God's word back at him, for it is written, for it is written, for it is written. So he's going to live his life only by God's word, because he knows that God's words contain the light, and it's that light that can keep him in the light. If he keeps obeying that light, he keeps energized, he stays in the light. But if he obeys any dark thought, he's going to get flooded with darkness, and he will lose out, just the way Adam did. Okay, so he knew his purpose, he knew his mission, and he came here to fulfill that. Now, even him going to the cross, you see, Jesus wasn't killed. He was killed. He didn't commit suicide, but he knew he needed to go to the cross. But when his time, when he had fulfilled his mission, he had released the words that he was supposed to release, the teachings, the words, and everything that God sent him to teach and make disciples and everything. He had finished his course. He had made the point. Okay. Then he told them, look, I'm going to have to go to the cross. When I go to the cross, that's when I can actually deal with the darkness proper. The disciples and everyone didn't understand that. They were like, no, why would you let them kill you? They knew he had the power. No one could have killed Jesus if Jesus didn't permit them to kill him. He didn't commit suicide. He didn't just jump on a cross and kill himself. That would have been wrong. And God didn't kill his son, as some people have said, God killed him. Why would God commit murder when he said we shouldn't? Thou shalt not kill, and then God killed his son. No. The Roman soldiers and the Jewish religious leaders killed him, and the people killed him. And I see the Roman soldiers like the Gentiles. They represent us, the Gentiles, and then the Jews as well. So everyone killed him. Everyone killed him. They crucified him. They called him a heretic, and they accused him of all sorts of stuff. And they hung him on the cross and killed him. But he knew, you see, that he was going to be killed. And he knew that that was the only way he could take the darkness back. That was the only way he could get rid of the darkness. He had to be killed. His physical body had to die. Or well, it didn't. The physical body didn't have to die. His spirit needed to be able to take on the darkness and take it all into his spirit and take it away. That's what he needed to do. He needed to find a way to get a hold of that darkness and absorb it into himself and then take it away. And the way God structured the system is that a sacrifice would take care of that. A blood sacrifice, because the life of every creature is in the blood. So life is in the blood. And God is saying, if you can have a spotless, clean, holy sacrifice, okay, anyone who will sacrifice himself to get this done means that he's going to have to go on that cross. He's going to allow death to come his way. Because ordinarily, if he's walking in the light, it's not easy to kill him. Because his physical body is being super empowered by the true light. You see, sickness and disease, Jesus never talked about sickness because he was never sick. You know, he was like just like Adam before the fall, before he fell into darkness. This stuff is powerful. It won't let any germs into you. It won't let anything, you know, it's too powerful. So they couldn't have killed him. Just like John the apostle that we talked about earlier, how he was thrown into a hot pot of oil and he didn't do nothing to him. They dragged him on the floor, tried to kill him, did all sorts of things. It just couldn't take him out because he had great understanding of the true light that you're gaining now. He had great understanding. The more you understand what you're carrying, when you get the true light back into you, and we'll show you how to do that. You know, John understood in a very unusual way what he was carrying. The Apostle Paul and other disciples understood it in different degrees, and were able to, you know, toy with death. Died when they wanted to die. So they will let you come and kill them when they're ready to go. Not that you can just kill them or they die in a car accident or some kind of, and they didn't have cars back then, maybe in a horse ride accident or whatever. So the true light is more powerful than that. So now Jesus allowed them to do it because that was the only way he could come in touch with death. That was the only way he could come in touch with darkness, because based on allowing dark thoughts to come in, he's not going to do that. He had to stay pure. He has to stay spotless, light with no darkness at all, just like God. But it's the only way he could take in all that darkness from the entire earth, sap it all in, was at the point of death. Okay, so it was by choice. It was by choice that he did it. So when he allowed them to do what they had to do, and they brought him by divine design to the cross. Okay. So now we read Matthew 27 verse 46. Jesus is at the cross now. Matthew 27. Let's show you some stuff that happens there. 27 and okay, wait. I can't jump this. This is very crucial. John chapter 9 verse 5. Jesus said something, that while I am on the earth, I am the light of this world. That's a very powerful statement, because the true light was in him, and he's the only one who was carrying that true light. So when Jesus stepped into the earth, the true light came back into the earth. And you know what? The true light is very powerful. He was the only one walking the earth that had the true light in him, okay, from birth. So that light came with him into the world, and the whole world was lighted up. Now, people, except you're able to kind of, I said these things are scientifically, you can measure them scientifically. If we had, I'm very sure, if we had people who were already, who already had the kind of scientific equipment and technology that we have today, back in the day when Jesus came, and they had measured the soil and especially in Israel, in the area where Jesus was, if that's the area that he allowed light in him to influence, I think it influenced the whole world. It did. The light that he came in with was the true light, and it kind of, just like Adam, it engulfed the entire earth. So the earth, if you could measure it, if we had people who could measure it, the earth, you would see that the energy level in the earth was more. It was higher, it was stronger than what it was before Jesus came in. I'm talking practically, scientifically, you could prove this. The light, when the true light came in through Jesus, back again into the earth, we had something similar to what Adam had, but this time you couldn't see it physically. Like you could see with Adam, you could see, you could see that light all over him. But this time God did it in a different way, where it was contained on the inside of him. You see, it was contained. That's why, remember when he did the transfiguration, he opened up a little so that Peter, James, and John could see what he's really made of on the inside. And they say the light that came out of him on that mountain, he said there's nothing white. They've never seen anything whiter. It was whiter than snow. There is no such light, not sunlight, nothing. It was sunlight's like yellow. This stuff was white. And it was just, they've never seen anything like it, they said. That's what they recorded when he opened up a bit to show them what he's really made of. So when that true light came, Jesus said, right now, I am the light of this world. There's light, the true light is back in the world, and it's kicked things up. So you would see that protons, neutrons, electrons, I believe, would have been more active, more powerful. There was more energy, there was more power available in the world. Is why a woman could touch the hem of his garment and virtue would flow out. The Bible called it virtue. It was power, flow out and heal her of a sickness, issue of blood for 12 years. She'd been having the issue, bleeding for 12 years, and touched just his clothes, touched the hem of his garment, and bang, it just wiped that thing out and put her body back the way it was supposed to be at creation. The same light created everything, remember? But this is the real original light that created the lesser lights, the sunlight, the light that we can measure. Remember, we talked about that. So the true light was in the world. Again, someone was carrying the true light. And he said, right now, I'm the light that the whole world is enjoying. And if people could measure it, they could have measured the energy levels of the entire world had gone up. Now, this is what happened. This is what happened in Luke chapter 19. Verses 4, this is what Jesus said, Luke 19, 41 to 45. So we read John 9:5. John 9:5 is where he said, I'm the light of this world. While I'm here, there's light everywhere because of me. John 19 and Luke 19, and 41 to 45. This is very important so you can understand, because we're going to show you how technology and all of that was possible in our times, or in the past 200-300 years. Luke 19, 41 to 44. Luke 19, 41 to 44. Just follow me patiently. We're going to understand the truth about everything. 41, it says, and when he was come near, this is Jesus, when he was come near, he beheld the city, and he wept over it. He started crying. This is Jerusalem. He started crying. When he came near the city, he just started weeping. And he said, verse 42, if thou hast known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thy eyes. For the days will come on you that your enemies will cast a trench about you and compass you round about and keep you in on every side, and shall lay you even with the ground, and your children with you, and they shall not leave you. They shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knowest not the time of thy visitation. Now, you know what that means? Jesus was crying. He was carrying the true light. Again, just like Adam, all over again. But he said that their eyes have been blinded to it. Remember, knowledge and understanding has a lot to do with the eyes, the opening of the eyes. The more you know, the more your eyes are open. Remember, they knew evil, so their eyes were open to nakedness and shame and fear. And when you know the good thing, when you know good, your eyes will be open to the good things, and you start getting the good results. So Jesus was weeping because they couldn't see what was right in front of them. The true light has come again. The light that created everything is in this world again. The entire earth is highly energized. The power, the energy, all of that, the true light, the original source of all things is here inside of me. And Jesus is going around healing the sick and doing all of that. And these guys just couldn't tap into it. That's why he was crying. They couldn't tap into it. So they kept moving around in their darkness and suffering and dying. And he was weeping because they're not supposed to be suffering and dying. with all kinds of sickness and disease and all kinds of troubles and all kinds of marital issues, all the side effects of the darkness. He just saw people crying, emotional issues and financial issues and social issues, every kind of problem. They were confused, they were involved in all kinds of stuff that in the beginning was not so. And he was crying and he said, oh, if only you knew who was standing with you and what I carry, so that you can tap into this stuff while I'm here. Because he knew he was going to go to the cross, But he saw that the children of Israel, who were his biological kindred, you see, they're all sons of Abraham, they're all children of Abraham. So, he was weeping for them. This stuff came to you, and he saw the thing going to the Gentiles because they're not going to receive it properly. Just a handful of them are going to receive it. The rest of them are rejecting this stuff. So he wept. See, because you know not the time that you're being visited. God himself has come to visit you, and you don't know how to tap into it. You don't know how to tap into that true light. And that's the essence of the basics, the reason why God gave me the revelation that I'm teaching, to teach you how to tap into the true light. Okay? He was crying because they didn't know how to tap into the true light. Until today, Christians who now have access to the true light, and I'll show you how we got it back. We now have access to the true light, but under new conditions. Many don't know how to tap into it, how to pull the virtue from it, how to pull the power out of it and make use of it. That's why it's there. That's why you have it. That's why you were created with it, to have dominion in every area. Okay, but we're going to learn that. So Jesus wept. And John 14 and verse 13. We go back to John chapter 14. We're building our case. We're getting there. John 14 and verse 13. John 14 and 13. Hereafter I will not talk. Is that right? Hereafter I will not talk much with you, for the prince of this world cometh, and he hath nothing in me. So the prince of this world, that's the darkness, the devil, Satan. He said he's come to me, but he has nothing in me. In other words, he can't put off any darkness into me. I don't obey anything he suggests to me. I don't. So I stay pure, I stay true. And hereafter I'm going to be gone very soon. The prince of this world has done everything, but he's found nothing. He's keep coming to me. So the devil kept trying to stain the light that Jesus was carrying, trying to get him to fall into darkness the way Adam did. And then when he thought he couldn't succeed, he arranged the mob to crucify him. He arranged the mob to crucify, not knowing that he was being used by God. He thought he was being smart, but he was actually being used. Very similar to well, we haven't seen the results of the Russia collusion investigation going on in America. I hate to digress into that, but it just reminded me, if it turns out at the end of the day that the Clinton team actually did work with the FBI and all these people, and they actually did plant spies in Trump's campaign and used their powers, and the whole intelligence community worked against his campaign and then planted that whole Russia collusion. If it was all some kind of conspiracy to bring him down, and then it comes out there's no evidence, at the end of the day, when the table turns, this is similar to what happened to Jesus. When the table turns and the truth comes out, and you find out that these guys are actually the ones who did it, and they're the ones who are trying to scream, crucify him, crucify him. And it turned out to be that they're the ones who were being played. They played themselves. They played themselves. If that turns out to be the truth, then that means they'd set themselves up. They should have just left him alone. They should have left the Trump man alone. They should have just left him alone and let the election just go, rather than try to plant Russian spies and then have some kind of insurance program or insurance plan, to pull him down if he does win and all that kind of stuff. They should have just left him alone, because the whole thing, if it turns out that all the evidence comes out and its fingers are pointing back to them, and being that they're the ones who colluded with the Russians and trying in order to stop Trump and use state powers like the security outfit, the table's going to turn. So the joke's on them. So that's what happened to the devil. He pushed Jesus to the cross. He said, well, if I can't get darkness into you, I'm going to kill you and take you out the earth. not knowing that killing him was the worst thing he could have done, because that was the only way Jesus was going to be able to absorb all the darkness and free all of mankind. And I'll show you all of humankind, and let's see how that happened. Okay, so the prince of the world, this world has come, can't get anything on me. And now Matthew 27 and verse 46. Now we can go to Matthew 20. Now we can go to the cross. Matthew 27. This is the day when Jesus had been set up. They lied on him and they set him up so that he can get crucified. Okay, this is what happened. Matthew 27 and verse 46. Right. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out. He was already crucified, he's on the cross. But about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That's to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Very powerful scripture, very important moment. He cried out, okay, my God, why have you forsaken me? This was at the point when Jesus he was about to give up the ghost, and he had opened himself up to death, to darkness. He had to do this by faith. He had to receive all the sins of all the darkness that Adam opened himself up to, that flooded the heart of Adam and Eve and affected all generations up until this point. Now, Jesus on the cross opened himself up to receive that darkness. This is the true light. You can only do it if you're pure and the true light is available. That's the only thing. Just like Adam had the true light and he had the ability to absorb all that darkness. So Jesus now has come again with the true light, and on the cross, he absorbed all that darkness. He took it in. He took it in. And remember, God is light, according to 1 John chapter 1, verse 5. And in him is no darkness at all. At that point, the true light had to leave. That's God, you see, had to leave. Remember, he can't, light and darkness cannot mix. And no spot of darkness is allowed to touch God. So he left. This was the point where the true light left him. It left his spirit so that he could take on all that darkness. So he could absorb all that darkness, just the way it left Adam. And when Adam made that decision, he jumped out because he had opened the door for darkness to come in. The true light left. Okay, so Jesus had now opened the door to take it all in. And I'll show you why he had to do it only on the cross. He couldn't do it while he was alive, because it's what he had to do with it. And he could only do that if he had the door of death open, physical death, because that's the only way your spirit can leave your body, right? So you can then go into the world, the spiritual world of heaven and hell and life and death. So when you're spiritually dead and spiritually, so that was the only way he could open the door. He had to open the door of death. He had to go through the door of death to go to the home of darkness, to deal with it once and for all. Okay, so he opens himself up and all that darkness comes in, and then the light leaves. And for the first time in his life, Jesus was separated from the true light. For the first time, he was separated from the true light. He'd never experienced that before. It was painful. It was terrible. So don't think that it didn't come at a price. He paid the price. But it was the only way that God could keep to his word. He's legalistic. That Adam is the God of the humankind, of the God of this world. He's not going to interrupt. So he had to use another human being who he put the true light in, came through Mary, and then, preached the truth, opened people's eyes, had disciples, explained everything to them that's going on, explained the whole light and darkness to them, including John, the man that we're reading most of the letters that he wrote, where we're getting most of this revelation from his teachings. He opened their eyes to show them a lot of things that he told them they couldn't understand until after this incident on the cross. He even told them what he's going to do on the cross, and this is the only way they could get this thing done. So as a human being, it had to be a human being who would do it, who by choice would deal with the darkness, by choice. So, and that's the only way it could be right and legal and permissible with God. So he's all powerful, he can do what he wants, but no, he has integrity, he keeps to his word. So that's the only technique they could use. He had to come as a human being and then on the cross when the door of death has been opened to him, so he can take the darkness that he absorbs out. Adam absorbed the darkness and lived and continued to live in darkness and gave birth to children with darkness. You see? So he died in the spirit realm, he got cut off from the true light, but he continued to live in the physical. He stayed on here and was given to dead children, birth to dead children. Children who were filled with darkness, because darkness affects your genes, just like light affects your genes. You see? So Jesus had to do it on the cross, so knowing that the door of death is open to him, his physical body is being totally brutalized, and as soon as the true light leaves, that was the only thing keeping his body alive. They couldn't do to any human being what they did to Jesus, and that person would have survived. Even before he got to the cross, they had mashed him up. They deformed him, they destroyed him. No one could have, people were shocked that he was still breathing, because you can't kill the body of someone with the true light that easily, especially one who knows what he's carrying and knows how to tap into it concerning his physical body and all that. So he hung on the cross, and as soon as he let go and said, okay, let me take in the darkness, then he took in all darkness, so light left, true light left, and he said, oh Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? That's all he could cry, because at that point he was just a normal human being. No true light was in him anymore. He was now a normal human being, and all the pain showed up. Before that point, you couldn't tell that he was feeling pain. He wasn't. The true light was insulating him. But at that point, but it's not just the physical pain that was the problem. It's the pain of darkness. Remember we said it comes with fear and all kinds of torment. It's the pain of all that darkness. Oh, darkness is a terrible thing. Darkness is terrible. Only people who go to hell that will experience the level on the earth. If you're walking with a dark spirit, the spirit that's still in darkness, you go through a lot of struggle, and you see people committing suicide in nations that are so rich. You see people jumping off the bridge and killing themselves, and all kinds of depressions and all kinds of stuff going on. Those are the effects of darkness, but that's just minimal compared to the fullness of darkness being taken in by one man. He took it all in. He took it all in. Took it all in. Okay? And so he had to cry out, Father, you've left me. Of course he will leave you. He knows he had to leave him. And then he went to the grave. Okay, so when he died, he went through the door of death and carried all that darkness. Rather than stay on alive with it, that was the only way he could do it, so that he could die physically and move out of this realm with the darkness that he just absorbed. Unlike Adam, he took it all in and left this realm through death. You see, that's why death had to be involved, physical death. So he left at that point of death. So he took it in just at the point when he was about to give up the ghost. Okay, and the Bible says after that, after he said that, it said he gave up the spirit, he gave up the ghost, he died, and took all that darkness with him. This is what happened there. And Matthew 27:45, you see, Matthew 27 and verse 45. Now look at this. Look at this. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land, all up until the 9th hour. This was recorded. Matthew recorded it in Matthew 27 verse 45. It was recorded again in Mark 15 and 33. It was recorded again by Luke in Luke 23 verses 44 to 45. From 6 o'clock, from the 6th hour to the 9th hour, I think from 6 to 9, I think 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. 3 solid hours, there was darkness all over the world. So when the true light left him, when the true light left him, there was a power step down. It went back to what I told you the world was, probably even worse. What I told you the world was before Jesus came, that if people had technological equipment that could measure the amount of energy and power and the fertility of the ground, the soil of the earth, the way people used to till and struggle, to get the earth to yield any kind of reasonable seed, except in the absence of the true light, when people were operating in the darkness that was, I told you everything was affected by darkness, everything, according to the word of God. So now when he came in, everything was receiving that extra energy beyond the energy of light that we know, protons, neutrons, and electrons, beyond the energy that we know. The true light was now here. It was physically available in Jesus, and it was affecting the whole world. He was now the God of this world. At least he had that influence. not over everything, because the darkness was still there inside of men, the children of Adam, all humankind, you know. So so the devil could still be called the prince of this world, because he was ruling over these men's lives. But the presence of Jesus affected everything. So when the true light left, the Bible says that for 3 hours, darkness. You know when it is, how it is when there's a power step down. You see, in places like Nigeria, where we use generators and stuff like that, when the national grid that supplies electricity to your house, when that goes off, because it just goes off, there's power cuts, so the power gets cut off, it just flings everybody into darkness, right? And then people switch on the generator, and then the generator comes on, and you know, the light from the generator could be a lesser power source. It wouldn't be as powerful as the one that comes live from the national grid, you see. So that's what happened. There was a step down, there was a power step down. So first there was a power outage. When the true light left like that, it threw everyone into darkness. I can tell you, that's what happened. Everyone went into darkness because the true light has gone back out. And because Jesus came with it, came into the world with it, people may not have really known what was going on, like I said, except someone was able to measure the difference in the productivity of vegetation. They'll be more productive. There was more energy available. There was more power available. People, if they understood how to use the true light, what made Jesus Christ, because they didn't know what to do with it, they could have accessed a lot of stuff. They could have accessed a lot of stuff while he was here. But when it left, it was so powerful. What happened? Physical darkness that everyone could see, like 3 hours, the entire world. Now this event was also recorded by Roman historians. It was recorded by Roman historians. If you Google it, you will see. They've got their names there, Africanus and different people who were Roman historians, and they documented that darkness that even in Rome they saw. Everywhere was dark for 3 hours on that particular day. And some of them didn't know what was happening in Rome with Jesus. It was just there in history. It was documented that there was a day when the whole world went black for 3 hours, from 6 p.m. to night, the exact same time. This is not Bible history. I'm talking about historians. Google it. You see historians recorded on that same day. Some of them later found out of what happened the day that some Christians later came up, and when they were telling the story of what happened when Jesus was crucified, some of them were able to connect it with that. They were like, is it the same darkness that we saw? What time was it? And they were able to. Some of them were able to find out that it was related to Jesus' crucifixion, and some didn't. They just recorded it that there was darkness for 3 good hours, on all around the place. Everyone was thrown into darkness for 3 hours, and then the light came back on. Now, I think the night and the next morning everything was back to normal, but it was 3 hours of clear pitch darkness, and then kind of like it was really going into evening, nighttime anyway. So when it lifted, that thick darkness lifted off, then the normal moonlight kind of came back, and next morning the sun was back up and all that. So this is what I know for sure that happened. The true light is powerful. When it left, everybody knew that it's gone. They didn't know what left, but they felt the effect of it. 3 hours of darkness.